it makes it a crime to give food or drink to voters waiting in line. Senator, why on earth, if Americans are willing to wait in hours to vote, would you make it a crime for people to come and give them a bottle of water?
Well, all I can say is that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I agree with you there.
Woo! Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina sounding a little bit like a Democrat for a moment this morning. This in response to one part of a sweeping new voter suppression law in Georgia. The law requires identification for absentee ballots, limits absentee ballot drop-off locations, and, as you heard, bans handing out food or drink, as in water, to voters who are waiting in line. And it is all under the guise of fixing widespread voter fraud, a problem proven to be virtually non-existent. Critics call it Exhibit A in the GOP's war on voting rights and Jim Crow in the 21st century. But it's not just Georgia. Republicans in 43 states are pushing at least 250 laws that could create hurdles for tens of millions of voters. And in Arizona, there is a push to restrict mail voting in particular. Joining me now, Katie Hobbs, Arizona Secretary of State. Katie, welcome. Before we get specifically to Arizona, I want to show you the list of the new restrictions in Georgia. And as a Secretary of State, Katie, which one of these concerns you the most? I'm curious what your reaction is overall to this new law.
Yeah, I mean, what's clear about all of these laws that are being proposed and signed into law is that they are simply a reaction by GOP majority legislators that don't like the outcome of this last election. None of these laws or bills actually fix real issues in elections. And, you know, in Arizona, I can say that none of the bills that are moving forward right now that would restrict voting were crafted in consultation with election officials, the folks on the ground actually doing the work. And none of them solve problems that actually exist.
So do you have any worries that Arizona could become the next Georgia?
Well, certainly I'm concerned about a number of bills that are moving through that would take us far backwards in terms of mail-in voting, a system that was passed in Arizona by a Republican majority legislature and has been enjoyed by voters here for decades without problems. We have a great system in place to ensure the security of vote by mail, and there's absolutely no reason to take us backwards in that regard, except if you are trying to make it harder for people to vote.
So, Katie, let's focus on the mail-in voting. That is a huge thing in your state. I believe 80% of voters, I'm looking at just to make sure, they choose to vote by mail. That went up to 88% in the last presidential election. So what would the impact be of targeting that?
Well, I mean, just like I said, it would make it harder to vote. And the areas that would be the most hard hit are the areas that already have a number of barriers to voting, which we really worked hard to try to address in this last election. And so it makes our jobs even harder in terms of working to continue to increase voter engagement in the process.
What about the threat to purge infrequent voters from an early voter list? What kind of effect could that have?
Well, I want to clarify, it's not even infrequent voters. It's if a voter is on the permanent early voter list and they get their ballot in the mail, but they choose to go vote in person instead, which a number of people did in this last election because they didn't want to wait to get their ballot in the mail. So they went on the first day of early voting.
Okay.
That would be a criteria that they could be removed from the list as well.
So tell me so if someone said, send me a mail-in ballot, but then they choose to go, that would knock them off a list?
Yes, it could.
I mean, what's the reaction among Arizonans to that one in particular? Because I imagine a lot of people said, send me a ballot, just in case I want to do it that way. But guess what? I'm really excited about this. I want to go on the first day of early voting. You've got to have some opposition to that among the constituents there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the permanent early voter list in Arizona is popular among both parties. 75% of voters are signed up that way. So it means they get their ballot in the mail for every single election they're eligible to vote in. They don't have to request it each time. And it's hugely popular. I'm talking to voters every day who are not necessarily usually engaged in the legislative process, and they are incensed about what they are seeing happen right now. And I think to a large degree, the legislature, they're getting away with it because there's not as much access to the process this year.
So of the 24 or so measures that are out there, which one are you worried about the most in Arizona?
Well, I'm worried about the one that you have to include identification with your mail-in ballot.
Yeah.
That's never been a process before, and it'll just make it more ballots that are more likely to be discounted in the process.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I know a lot of Georgians are concerned about that one as well. That one passed in Georgia. All right, Katie Hobbs, thank you so much. Meantime, the Empire State of Mind may soon be the high life. Why Andrew Cuomo is likely to sign off on legalizing recreational marijuana.